Climate change is set to be one of the dominant issues on the global stage this year, and one of the most powerful figures driving the push for action is Bill Gates. In the 1970s, a time when most people were using typewriters, Bill Gates founded a company to create computer software.
Hello, I'm Bill Gates, chairman of Microsoft.
Microsoft, and later the operating system Windows, took off, making Gates America's youngest billionaire. His success and wealth saw the software developer embrace philanthropy, funding health research and aid worldwide.
CO2 is warming the planet.
And now Bill Gates is tackling global warming, putting forward his plans to solve climate change in his new book, How to Avoid a Climate Disaster. Bill Gates, thank you very much for your time. You write in your book that there are only two numbers that anybody needs to know in regards to climate change, 51 billion and zero. Why?
Well, 51 billion is the number of tons of CO2 equivalents that we're putting into the atmosphere every year. And if we want to stop the temperature from rising, we have to reduce that all the way down to zero. And that's going to be very hard because there's a lot of sources of emissions.
Is zero emissions achievable?
This will be the hardest thing humanity's ever done because the physical economy, cement, steel, transportation, agriculture, all of these sectors will have to make changes. So only by being focused on innovation and scaling with the right policies on a global basis can we achieve one of the hardest tasks that humanity's ever been asked to perform. And yet the commitment of the young generation that they don't want to destroy all these natural ecosystems and make the equatorial areas almost unlivable, where you'd have millions of migrants and a death rate 5 times as high as the peak of this pandemic every year.
On the pandemic, the COVID pandemic is estimated to have reduced greenhouse gas activity in 2020 by about 5%. When you think of the cost of that, 1 million people have died, tens of millions of people have lost their jobs. That gives us a sense of how much effort and change is going to be required to reduce emissions by a further 95%.
Well, without innovation, the cost of going green, what I call that green premium, is way too high. It's over $5 trillion. So the good news here is that in some categories like electric cars or some of the electricity generation with solar and wind, some categories we have a clear path to bring that premium down to zero. But we've been working really hard on those. Now we need to get to work on the other source of emission and increasing the size of the electric network as the primary source of clean energy while continuing to maintain reliability.
In the United States particularly, but also here in Australia, the conversation about climate change has been very much hijacked by politics. How do we get it out of that framework?
There are opportunities that come out of this for the countries that lead the way. But I wish that all political parties would agree with the goal. They might disagree about how to put the resources in, and that would be great. But if you have parties that don't accept the goal, then it's unlikely we'll get there. And so young people, no matter which party they're in, we need even more of their courage.
One of the things that's factored into climate change denialism has been the spread of misinformation on social media and the way that people can cloister themselves into echo chambers that just affirm their existing opinions rather than challenge them with inconvenient facts. How do you think the major technology companies should address that kind of misinformation?
Well, certainly the conspiracy theories around the vaccine, they're tragic if they prevent people from wearing masks or being willing to take the vaccine as it becomes available. With climate, it is complex. We have a challenge of people who don't think it's a big problem. We have a challenge with people who think it's easy to solve, that if they just divest or, get the utility executives to be friendly, then it's solved. I've heard people say, hey, let's finish in 10 years. And yet there's no chance as you really put together a practical plan to validate the great idealism and energy being brought to this issue. A 2050 plan is still a very hard plan, but I've seen breakthrough innovations in everything I've done, and I think we can drive that here as well.
Do you think that the tech companies need to be policing the spread of misinformation on their platforms, or would you be concerned about the free speech implications of that?
Well, certainly there are some things that are so extreme in terms of anti-vaccine or Holocaust denial that you can draw a line. But how you draw that line and who is put in charge of that, and is it practical in terms of the scale involved? I'm not proposing solutions to that, like are doing in terms of funding vaccines for the pandemic. But it's a challenge for the governments and industry that the creative thought about how to draw that line. I still haven't seen a good solution.
What do you say to somebody who might say to you, well, it's okay for you, Bill Gates, you fly around the world on your private jet. What about your personal carbon footprint?
Well, I've been able to zero out my footprint by funding people like Climeworks who do direct air capture, and by buying aviation fuel that's made from plants. Now, the price to do that was very high, and so it's not practical for the world to do it in that brute force way. But by buying those products, hopefully we can drive the volume up, create competition, and create innovation. So, my aviation fuel costs 3 times as much now as normal aviation fuel, and that carbon capture I paid for was $400 a ton. So, it's got to be cheaper through innovation, or it won't be practical.
Bill Gates, we appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.